One of the strange phases that my friends and I went through when we were in our late teens was when we all used to go out and explore abandoned buildings and properties. There was a time when it was so much fun, and at times it was a great rush. As a group, we tended not to scare easily, which is probably why it was so much fun for us. The only deterrent was the possibility of getting into trouble. That was until we all heard about this abandoned asylum that was only about an hour-and-a-half drive from our town. As soon as we all heard about it, we began figuring out a good time for us to go check it out. And sure enough, we all planned to visit it the following weekend. The weekend eventually came, and we all got our gear together. And since we had planned on spending the night, that included 2 tents, a couple of sleeping bags, battery-powered lanterns, and some food that we could cook on a small propane stove. And just like we heard, it was only about an hour-and-a-half before we ended up finding this small, dirt path that ended up leading us to the abandoned asylum. The sun was getting ready to set as we pulled up to a small parking lot outside of the locked gate. Behind the gate was a large brick building that had once been an asylum for criminally insane. It was allegedly abandoned in the mid-1900s when the owner of the property passed away and no one could afford to keep the facility open. The gate, that was once intended to keep people out of the property, had a massive hole cut out of the wire, which was clearly made by people who were doing exactly what we were there to do: explore. The first thing we did after getting through the gate was looking for a way in, and as it would happen, there was one window that didn't have any glass in the pane, and that window ended up leading into a small room that must have been one of the old hospital rooms. As soon as we stepped through the threshold of the window, we decided that it would make the perfect room for us to set up camp. It had enough room for all of our tents. The door appeared to still lock, and the exit would be right next to us. It was perfect. It took me and 3 of my friends about 20 minutes to set up the tents and sleeping bags, and by the time the sun had almost entirely set, we figured that before setting up something to eat, we should take a look around. The 4 of us grabbed our flashlights and lanterns and began exploring. As soon as we stepped into the hallway of the asylum, it was clear that it had been abandoned for a very long time. The paint on the walls was peeling from all sides, and there was an apparent water damage all over the place from burst pipes. Every room that we looked into was almost identical aside from the graffiti found on the walls. Some of it was harmless, but a lot of it was clearly meant to throw people off by saying things like, "Get out," or "She's coming for you." As we made our way deeper and deeper into the empty asylum, I began getting this feeling as if someone had been watching us. I kept looking over my shoulder but saw nothing other than a dark hallway. I thought I was losing my mind. That is until I heard the clear sound of footsteps. All of us turned to see who it was behind us, and though we didn't see anyone directly, me and my buddy Aaron could have sworn we saw a shadow move down the hall and into one of the rooms. Right away, we were all put on edge and unanimously decided that we should go back to our camp and maybe eat some dinner to hopefully calm down. We all slowly made our way back to the room, and as soon as we were inside, I made sure to lock the door. I began digging through my pack for all the equipment we needed for dinner when I was stopped by the sound of a woman laughing. We all looked to the locked door as the laughter grew louder and louder. Whoever it was had been walking toward the room we were in, and as they grew closer, their laughter seemed to shift into a maniacal cackle. And just as whoever it was got outside of our door, the laughter stopped. Silence fell over the room, and we all waited for what was going to happen next. Then, out of nowhere, the silence was broken by the sound of the door handle shaking violently. She was trying to get to us. Without saying a single word to each other, we all made our way to the window as fast as we could and made a run for the car. We left most of our gear behind aside from our flashlights, but it could all be replaced over time. We couldn't spend another second in that place. As soon as we all got into the car, we pulled out of the parking lot and never looked back. It was hands down one of the scariest moments of our lives. There used to be this abandoned house on our road, and before it got torn down, my cousin and I decided to go inside and check it out, and it turned out to still be really nice on the inside. So being the young kids that we were, we decided to throw a small overnight party in the house with all of the kids on the road and from school. And to be honest, the party started out as a ton of fun. We had a bunch of soda and music, and we were using flashlights to light up each room. The house had 2 floors, and there were a few people hanging out in each of the rooms. It honestly couldn't have been going better. I was in the room on the first floor where a bunch of us had started playing a game of Catan, and the entire time we were playing, I kept saying that the people above us were being really loud, but it turned out that they weren't being loud at all. In actuality, the wood on the floor had just been rotten through after getting water damage. We didn't know that though, so we were all just having a really good night. At least that was until my cousin ended up slipping upstairs, and when he fell on the floor, he came crashing right through. I'll never forget the loud cracking sound of the wood breaking underneath him as he came falling down from the room above me. He fell about 9 feet from the upstairs floor to the first floor and landed right on the game that we had been playing. He was groaning from the pain, but little did we all know, things were about to get a lot worse. It turned out one of the reasons that the home had been abandoned was because of the insect infestation, and that ended up leading to a nice little meal house for a bunch of local spiders. In other words, the walls of the abandoned home were filled with literally countless spiders, and when my cousin came crashing through the floor, he definitely disturbed them. All of us who were in the room below ended up being showered in a bunch of those 8-legged monsters. I will never forget the feeling of them crawling all over my body. We all began freaking out, and my first instinct was to run out of the house as I tried to get as many of the spiders off of me as I could. But I could feel them crawling around my hair and my back. Some had gotten into my clothes. It was awful. I ran back to my house as fast as I could and stripped down before hopping into the shower. But believe me, when I tell you that for the next 2 weeks, it felt as though I had spiders walking all over me. It was really hard to fall asleep for a while because of my paranoia. We could have not been happier when they finally tore that wretched house down. One of the scariest moments of my life was when I was trying to do some overnight exploration of this abandoned suburb back in 2009. It was 3 streets with houses on them that were all connected, and they had been abandoned before construction could be finished. There was a period of time when a small homeless community was set up in a few of the homes, but the police ended up forcing them out. As far as I knew at the time, it hadn't been visited for a few years, so I thought it would be a perfect place to go exploring. The plan was simple. I had my older brother drop me off at the end of the street with my backpack, which had all my supplies and water, and then I would walk through as many of the houses that I could get into without breaking anything. By the time I had gotten dropped off, it was already pretty dark, but that sort of thing didn't typically bother me. It was part of the thrill. Plus, each road was still illuminated by rows of streetlights that were each placed a couple of houses apart. The first few houses that I went up to were clearly locked, and surprisingly, none of the windows were broken or opened yet, so I wasn't able to get inside. But eventually, I did find a small blue house that actually had its front door already opened up. I turned on my flashlight as I walked up the steps on the porch and approached the door. It let out a loud creaking noise as I slowly swung it open and shined my light into the home. Thankfully, it appeared as if no one was inside, so I began making my way in and walking around. The interior of the house was surprisingly nice and well kept, at least on the first floor. As I made my way upstairs, I could see clear signs of vandalism as there was a ton of holes in the walls and a bunch of writing. And as I made my way deeper into the house, the strangest thing happened. I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone. I began looking around to see if anyone had been following me, or perhaps even had already been inside the house, but I couldn't find anything. Eventually, I decided to get out of the house and try to find a new one to check out. Sadly, I didn't get very far. As I made my way out of the small blue house and into the street, I looked down the road toward the other abandoned houses, and I could clearly see someone else standing about 100 yards down the road underneath one of the streetlights. I stopped dead in my tracks, hoping that he hadn't seen me, but when he began walking in my direction, I knew that he was on his way to me. I began to panic. I didn't quite know what to do. I mean, I could run, but that would only get me so far. I ended up figuring that my best bet was to get my brother to come back as soon as he could to get me while I tried to hide. I began looking around frantically, and the best thing I could think to do was run back into the abandoned house that I had just come out of. I made a run for the front porch and then through the door before closing and locking it behind me. As soon as I was inside, I pulled my phone out and called my brother, and when he answered, I very quickly whispered to him, "I need you to come back. Someone else is here with me and I don't know what they want." I didn't have to say any more before he let me know that he would be back to pick me up in 15 minutes. After hanging up on my brother, I slowly made my way to the front of the house to one of the windows that had faced the street. I made sure to keep myself out of sight as I peered out from the window to see if the man was actually following me. I stumbled back as I looked outside and I noticed him standing in the middle of the road right in front of the house. He was about 6 feet tall and had long black hair. He was wearing a denim jacket that looked to be torn, and as far as I could tell, he was looking around to figure out where I had gone. I scurried away from the window and toward the back of the house, in case he knew that I had gone inside. I figured I should try to head out of the back door and hide in the woods while I waited for my brother. And that's exactly what I did. As soon as I was outside, I quietly made my way to the woods behind the house, and once I had the cover of the trees, I began walking down toward the section of the road where my brother had dropped me off at. It wasn't too long before I saw the headlights that belonged to my brother's car, and I quickly made my way out into the road so that he could pick me up. After hopping into his car, I asked him if we could drive by the house real quick to see if the guy was still there. And to my surprise, the man was now standing at the window of the blue house looking into it. As we passed by him in the car, he turned to look at us. Even though I knew it was impossible, I swear he and I had made eye contact. Once we left, I never even thought about ever going back there.